Good evening and welcome. Thank you for coming out this evening. Let's begin our evening service tonight with some singing. Let's begin with number 817 in the Christian Hymnary. 817, Marvelous Grace of Our Loving Lord. And if you're able, let's stand.
Marvelous grace of our loving Lord, grace that exceeds our sin and our guilt, yonder on Calvary's mount outward, there the blood of the Lamb was spilled. Grace, grace, God's grace, grace that will pardon and cleanse within. Grace, grace, God's grace, grace that is greater than all our sin. Sin and despair like the sea waves roll, threaten the soul with infinite loss. Grace that is greater, yes, grace untold, points to the refuge, the mighty cross. Grace, grace, God's grace, grace that will pardon and cleanse within. Grace, grace, God's grace, grace that is greater than all our sin. Dark is the stain that we cannot hide. What can avail to wash it away? Look, there is flowing a crimson tide, whiter than snow you may be today. Grace, grace, God's grace, grace that will pardon and cleanse within. Grace, grace, God's grace, grace that is greater than all our sin. Marvelous, infinite, matchless grace, freely bestowed on all who believe. You that are longing to see His face, will you this moment His grace receive? Grace, grace, God's grace, grace that will pardon and cleanse within. Grace, grace, God's grace, grace that is greater than all our sin. You may be seated.
Number 392. 392. Ye are the light of the world.
Ye are the light of the world, driving the darkness away, shedding your beams on the walls, changing their night
356. Nearer, still nearer. 356.
Thank you, Anthony, for leading us in singing Grace That Exceeds Our Sin and Our Guilt is what we sang. Thank you for being here. Trust we can have a blessed time together. My desire was that 2 weeks ago we would have a salt presentation, and then 2 weeks later, we would have Brethren's meeting and we would talk about our opportunities in Cameroon. That was my desire. God had a different plan. And maybe Edward too. But here we are this evening, and my thoughts went to the value of a soul. It takes energy, it takes time, it takes finances to take the gospel to other countries. The value of a soul, obviously, the one verse that would give us a picture of that. For what is a man profit if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? What shall a man give in exchange for his soul? The whole world is not more value than of one soul. In Cameroon, or in Wayne County, or in Holmes County, or sitting in the sunlight pews tonight. The whole world is not more than the worth of that soul. 2 Corinthians 16, verse 9 is what drew me to this passage. Paul was planning to pass through Macedonia and maybe even winter there. And then it says, verse 7, 2 Corinthians, no, I'm sorry, not 2 Corinthians, it's 1 Corinthians. It's 1 Corinthians 16. Verse 6, that it may be that I will abide, yea, and winter with you, that ye may bring me on my journey whithersoever I go. For I will not see you now by the way, but I trust to tarry a while with you, if the Lord permit. But I will tarry at Ephesus until Pentecost. Verse 9, for a great door and effectual is opened unto me, and there are many adversaries. Now if Timothy come, see that he may be with you without fear, for he worketh the work of the Lord, as I also do. Let no man therefore despise him, but conduct him forth in peace, that he may come unto me, for I look for him with the brethren. As touching our brother Apollos, I greatly desired him to come unto you with the brethren, but his will was not at all to come at this time, but he will come when he shall have a convenient time. Watch ye, stand fast in the faith. Quit ye like men, be strong. Let all things be done with charity. I beseech you, brethren, you know the house of Stephanas, that it is the first fruits of Achaia, and that they have addicted themselves to the ministry of the saints. A great and effectual door is opened. A great door and effectual is opened unto me. Does any of you want to give the definition of that Old English, the effectual? A great door and effectual is opened. The Greek word is energes. Energes. The first time I saw it, it looked like energy. Energes. I don't know if that's where we get the word energy from or not, but that's what it means. Power. It means active. It means operative. It means able to swing. A great door and effectual is opened unto me. Having said that, I was wondering if Cameroon is a great door and effectual for sunlight. Paul says, if the Lord permit, I will tarry at Ephesus until Pentecost, and then I will come. In the end of that verse, it says there were great adversaries. Oh, so adversaries go along with open doors. If Timothy come, he worketh the work of the Lord. Don't despise him, even if he's young. He is also doing the work of the Lord. As touching the brother Apollos, I greatly desire him. But he's not coming because it's not convenient for him. And it doesn't sound like Paul condemned him for not having to call to go. Stay home, through the open door, young, old. watch ye stand fast in the faith, quit ye like men, be strong. We need to be standing fast in the faith. Quit ye like men. That's, again, an old English term. I wrote in my Bible, act manly. Maybe I shouldn't say act manly. It might mean be manly. Man up. But then the next verse says, let all things be done with charity. Doesn't matter if the door's open or closed, if we're young or old. If we don't do it in charity, it's not done at all. Then it talks about Stephanus, first fruits of Achaia, addicted themselves to the ministry of the saints. Addictions are bad, but this one isn't. This one is good, addicting to the ministry of the saints. Again, thank you for being here. I invite you to stand for prayer before I turn the time over to Edward. Father in heaven, thank you for this opportunity we have to be together tonight. Lord, I pray that you would open our eyes, open our hearts to your will, to the opportunities that are before us. Lord, I pray that you would show us the path, help us to be content in where you have called us to serve. May we be faithful. May we be doing all things with charity, with love for one another. Lord, I pray for Brother Edward. Thank you that he was able to come and to share. Give him clarity, give him wisdom. Pray that he would be able to say the things that would bring glory to your name. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. You may be seated. All right. Edward and his wife Rachel are here with us. Appreciate him coming. If he wouldn't have come, I would probably have been the one needing to do it. But I have learned to appreciate him. He was in the office next door and he moved. I don't know was I the reason that he moved or not, but he did move. But I still take the steps almost every day that he's there, and we converse, and I really enjoy his friendship and his work that he's doing. So I will turn the time over to you to give us the presentation.
Yeah, good evening. I'm thankful to be here. It's a little bit apprehensive here. I'm to give a presentation and my boss is sitting here. I'm not sure if that's good or bad or not, but no, I think Bert and I have spent enough time together. I'm not nervous in his presence. So, it's a blessing that I'm able to come tonight and that to be here with you. Like Bert already introduced, my name's Edward Martin, and I do work in the SALT program. I also work in the public relations at Christian Aid, where we do the newsletters and public speaking and open house slides and things like that. So that's just a small introduction. I intend to go through the nuts and bolts of the SALT program here. We're going to look at some pictures of actual program and things that are happening on the ground. Going to also try to understand poverty a little bit. Sometimes that's a little bit confusing. What is poverty and how does it function? And then at the end, I'd like to wrap it up and kind of ask the question, does the SALT program actually work? Is the SALT program effective? So that sometimes is a question that is being asked, and we want to answer that. Also, I'm going to open it up for questions at the end. So if you have questions, feel free to ask questions. So for now, we're just going to launch right into it. SALT Microfinance Solutions, it is a program of Christian Aid Ministries. Now, Christian Aid Ministries has over 50 programs right now. Various things that we do, like Bibles for the World. We do billboard evangelism, disaster response. When there's a storm or things like that here in the U.S., we respond to that according to the needs. Hope for the Handicapped, Special Needs Fund, Support a Widow, International Crises. These are just a few to name. SALT is one of those programs. But It is different from almost all the other programs that Christian Aid has. Salt does not give things away. But I still we still don't view salt as the solution to every need. In fact, it is a very good solution to help able-bodied men and women find opportunity and walk alongside them and help them provide for themselves. It's a very good opportunity for that. But there are many people, many candidates in this world, people in this world that are not candidates to salt. Salt does not give away Bibles. Salt does not put up billboards. So I just want to lay that out in the beginning, just because we believe that SALT is a very good program. It is not the only program, but we're going to look at that. But in any case, CAM as an organization is concerned about dependency and desires to exercise some discernment in how to deal with the poor. SALT is what we like to refer to as it is a Christ-centered solution to break a cycle of poverty. And so what is our goal is to help people help themselves. Sometimes we can have an impact even when Americans are not present, and that's what we want to go for. That's true sustainability. We live in a world full of needs. Sometimes it is really hard to discern how to deal with or how to provide for or how to walk alongside those needs. How can we best show the compassion of Christ? There's maybe a child that's dying of malnutrition somewhere, or you got some hardworking family that's suffering from famine. You have a Christian maybe that's waiting for their first Bible. How can we best show the compassion of Christ? Elderly widow with no one to care for her. We have a flood survivors that don't know where to start with the cleanup. You got disabled people and they don't have the basic supplies they need. You have maybe a Russian family or a Ukrainian family that is struggling to survive the war. I put up there Russian because yes, there are Russian families that are hurting in this war. You have sin-sick people that are searching for peace. But then you also have these needy, able-bodied men whose family has struggled in poverty for generations. And that is where we believe that SALT is the solution for. So that gives us a big scope of the variety of poverty that's out there. But sometimes I like to ask the question, what is poverty? And if we pause here for a moment and try to answer that, we might get a lot of different answers. But sometimes we look at poverty as somebody that's in rags or somebody that's hungry, and that's true. That's poverty. But at the basis of what is poverty? Poverty is simply there is lack somewhere. And sometimes we have poverty too, and maybe don't even realize it. Tonight we want to, first of all, look at the difference between critical and chronic poverty. I know those are maybe some high and lofty terms that are a little bit hard to get your hands around, but I want to try and explain it. There is a difference in poverty. All poverty is not created equal. So what is the difference? First, let's look at critical poverty. Here we have a man, and this is not from the most recent earthquake in Turkey. I haven't been able to yet find quite a good picture to fit this scene. You see this man right here? He is sitting there, a little hard to see. He basically has lost everything. This is after the Nepal earthquake back in 14 or 16, somewhere in there. And really, this man does not need teaching. This man does not need the SALT program. He does not need a microloan. Well, he might be able to maybe use it, but he does not need to be part of a savings group. What this man needs is help right now. And if he doesn't get help, if he doesn't get food, if he doesn't get water, he too might die. But there's a good chance that of his family members, but at least all his possessions are buried underneath the rubble. That is critical poverty. It's poverty that has of a critical nature. It needs to be addressed right now, or somebody is going to suffer greatly, or somebody is going to die, or in some way or the other experienced some harm. And Christian Aid and many other organizations have many programs directed towards critical poverty. They are directed towards helping, giving aid, many different programs like that. But this man does not have that. He has critical poverty. That's critical poverty. Now, let's look at chronic poverty. Chronic poverty it's also poverty. There's also lack there. This is a home in Uganda, by the way. And but it's not critical of nature. In other words, the people that are absent in that picture are not necessarily going to die if they don't receive help within a week or within days or within a month. In fact, they have been living this way for many generations, probably decades. And sometimes it's really hard to know how to help people like that. But we could ask the question, if we would give this new family a new house, would it help their problem? Probably it wouldn't, because within some time they would still be in poverty, and they would probably remove some of the components of the new house and sell it off and try to get by, and they're still in poverty. A new house probably would not help that problem. Let's categorize these a little bit. Let's split them up to help us understand a little farther. A critical need is something like earthquakes, tsunamis, hurricanes, effects of war. You have elderly and disabled are under that category, because if they don't get help, they too will suffer greatly. And so those people, what they really need is relief. They need aid. Yes, we can call it handouts. They need assistance if those people don't get help. Now, on the other side of the equation, we have this chronic need, chronic poverty. And those are caused by things like learned dependency, maybe. They have learned to depend on other people to take care of them. That would be maybe this case of many Haitians. They just live for the next food box or the next handout. Poor management skills. And those poor management skills are often caused by the absence of good mentors, good teachers. That's why they are not managing well. Unutilized resources. In other words, they have things right there in their villages, in their communities, that they are not putting to use because nobody has taught them how to do it. Absence of startup capital. That's what the drivers are behind this chronic need, this chronic poverty. What those people need is opportunity. They need hope. The one side of the equation needs a handout. The other side of the equation needs a hand up. That's the difference between poverty, between critical and chronic poverty. The SALT program is specifically directed at these chronic needs right here. It is focused on the poverty that is out there, that's been there for many generations, and yet has never been a real solution. And one of the, actually I'm jumping ahead, let's go to the next slide. Providing relief in a situation of chronic need, where you have this long-term, long-standing poverty. If we turn around and give those people handouts, this is what happens. It creates long-term dependency. They become so dependent. I'm going to tell you a real quick story. I don't want to blow my whole evening, but tell these little stories. But there was a family in Haiti. One of our Haitian staff was down there, and they observed this family, and they were in poverty. Very, very poor family. It's an extended family there. And he noticed that every spring of the year, when it's time to get into the fields and start planting, they were not in a hurry at all. And everybody else was out there working up their fields with a hoe and a shovel, of course, and hoeing their ground and getting ready for planting. They were just not in a hurry at all. And they finally, in the last minute, they got a little bit something planted, and their crops looked of such nature also. And he wondered what was really going on there. Well, come to discover, there was a grandmother in this house that was getting a food parcel from Christian Aid Ministries, Help for the Elderly program. And I'm sure that Cam probably didn't know that there was quite a few able-bodied people living in that same house. That food box came every month, and it was just barely enough for the whole family and the extended family and the aunts and uncles and brothers and sisters and everybody that lived there. But that's how they survived, and they were so dependent on this American's handout that they had no gumption to go out there and get to work and plant the garden and plant their fields. creates long-term dependency if we start throwing aid or handouts to chronic poverty, to a chronic need there. It reminds the beneficiary or the person that is getting this box that they are simply incapable of helping themselves. I've heard another Haitian tell me that he sometimes, when he gets these handouts, he turns around in anger at having received this. He's just so disgusted at the whole situation that here he makes him feel like he's incapable of taking care of himself. It focuses, the focus shifts from their resources to our resources, or the Americans' resource. Instead of looking around them and saying, what can we do to take care of this situation? They turn around to the American and say, what can you do to help us? The focus becomes on our resources, the handout, the beneficiary, instead of them, the people receiving the aid. And it changes the focus. It causes a feeling of shame. Covered that just a little bit. And also it creates this feeling of paternalism. We become like parents to them. They become like children to us. That is the danger of throwing aid in situations where there are able-bodied people, but yet they have no opportunity to help themselves. So providing relief in chronic aid, and it talks about the Bible verse there in 1 Timothy 5:13. They with all learn to be idle, wandering from house to house, not only idle, but tattlers also, and busybodies, speaking things which they ought not. It just provides this scenario where they should actually be out working and doing things, but yet many times these people don't have aid, don't have the opportunity, I was wanting to say. Why SALT exists? What is the reason? What are the goals behind the SALT program? It is this: to help people discover sustainable ways to provide for their families, and then also to model and teach a biblical way of life. We want to teach them how to provide for their own, and as we are teaching, we are also teaching them or showing them how the Christian life should be walked out. Both of those are very important. We can't do one without the other. Okay, so much for a little bit of the introduction. Let's look at a few places where the SALT program is operating. All the countries in red is where we currently have the SALT program. The United States, of course, would be the SALT and Light, so that is a little different from the rest of the SALT. I'll briefly cover that. Haiti, tiny little island country right down in there, is by far our biggest program. We have 30,000 members there. Our other large programs would be in places like Nigeria, down in here, actually up here, and so those have been going for quite a while. Then also in green are countries that are startup opportunities, or we're planning towards that direction. Request, that would be Cameroon. It would be, Cameroon's on there. Liberia. Don't even see if we have up there or not. It is active already. I see that. That's in red. Okay. And then Paraguay and Colombia. So that's the areas where we are currently working or endeavoring to move towards that direction. Currently there are 83,000, as of the end of the year, there were 83,459 SALT members in 22 countries that we were working in. Here's a little bit graph how this all started from 2007 on up through 2022. It just kind of keeps on growing. As this grows and other countries and communities and villages see this, and they see that it's actually working, they say, you know what, we want that too. Can somebody come over and help us? And I think that's the situation that you're seeing in Cameroon, that they are seeing opportunity, and they would desire also to get some help here. This is a picture here of the SALT, what you call the SALT family. There's like 5 components within the SALT program. We have savings groups, which is by far our biggest program. Microloans, which that is actually where we started at, handing out microloans. I'll explain all these separately, by the way. You don't have to try to figure it out just yet. AgriPlus is the agricultural dimension. And then vocational training more focuses on giving job skills for orphans, or not even just orphans, but those that are wanting to learn a skill but don't really have a skill. and just helping them and training them in that way. And then also Salt and Light in the United States here. And all of those actually work under the same principle. It is to help people find opportunity in life to provide for their families or to better endeavor to help them with their financial situation. And while we're doing that, we walk alongside teaching them biblical principles of how the Christian life should look. And I like the... I think it was Jesus that told the disciples when he sent them out 2 by 2, and as you go, preach. And I really like that idea, the concept behind that in the SALT program. As we go out and teach them practical life skills, we preach the gospel, or at least in principle we teach that. Let's look at savings groups. I'm going to look at all 5 of these separately and kind of give in a nutshell how it functions. Savings groups, you have a group of men and women like this that are gathered together from one village. They trust each other. They form this group. In that group, they decide who's going to be the president or maybe the leader of the group. They have a secretary and a treasurer. Other things you'll see here, there's a steel lockbox right up here. That's where they'll put their savings as they come together every week and save money. Each of them has this little book here. In fact, they have 2 books. One is called a passbook. That's where all the financial record keeping is. It's just a real neat little checkbook register type thing, maybe. And that's where they keep their record every week. Very meticulous. They're good record keepers, by the way. And then they also have the manual that we teach out of. We should have brought one along. I forgot to do that. So that's how a savings group works. And they'll meet every week. They have a man, I think there's probably somebody like this would be the facilitator. He's the teacher. He goes from one group to the next. One facilitator might have maybe 10 or 12 different groups, and he goes one day, he'll go to this group, then he'll go to this group, and he'll teach out of that manual to these members. He is actually a paid staff person. Christian Aid pays him, or the SALT program. He would be a Christian man that we have confidence in, that he is able to share the gospel alongside with the financial principles. He'll understand the SALT manual very well and teach them. And so these are their members. They come together every week and they save a little. First they'll have their teaching. They'll have their spiritual, their financial. Sometimes it's just practical teaching, like you shouldn't be beating your wife. Now to us that would seem, well, everybody would know that, but that's cultural for them, you know. Some of those cultural things that they do that they don't realize is wrong according to the Word of God, we teach them. You know, Jesus has a better way for you. And so we'll teach them practical things. They'll be saving their money, and it goes into this lockbox, but after 3-4 weeks, there's a little pile of money in there. And then one of them decides, she wants to borrow out of that lockbox. And she wants to maybe start a small business. Or maybe she has a little roadside store here and she wants to buy a little bit more supplies. And so she'll do that. And she'll make loans then, pay loan payments every week, pay interest. They charge interest. Some of them charge substantial amounts of interest. So they'll have all their rules there, their guidelines that they go by every week. So that's the basic function of a savings group. Now, here we have this lady. She thinks, you know what? I could start this stand, this market stand. So she makes the loan, kind of a little cartoon graphics there that shows us how it's done. They bring their money for their savings. They carefully record it in the record book, and everything's kept in the lockbox, like I said, until they start investing their money. Money can be invested into a new business, maybe an existing one. Sometimes it's just putting metal on their house, or a roof on their house. Sometimes it's to pay for school fees, things that they really need, but they don't have the capital to go and do it. They can buy land, property, various things. The group decides collectively whether they're going to approve the loan or not. They hash that out and decide among each other, and it's done in various countries. It's done various ways. At the end of the year, or at the end of their cycle, it's usually for a year, all the money has to be paid back and all the interest has to be calculated, and then they disperse all the money that each member had saved along with interest. And there's been many times for their first cycle when they done this, that grown men have sat down and cried like a baby because they have never seen this much money in their life.
and it's all theirs. It just gives them the mechanism to save money and to have principle and to get teaching every week and teaching every week and teaching every week. But yes, they have not realized that could be possible. Now we could ask the question, well, why don't they just save money? Why do they need a group to teach them how to do that? Well, in that culture, there's some cultural things that are a little bit difficult for us to understand. So for example, if I'm living in the same village as Bert is here, and I maybe have a doctor bill to pay, and I know that he just sold a goat, I just go over to him and I ask him for the money. And he is obliged to give it so I can pay my bill. If he doesn't, he's a black sheep in the community. And that's a common thing. They have never had the opportunity to save a large amount of capital because they're always borrowing from each other. So I may borrow that money, and then another neighbor comes down the road, and he knows I borrowed some from Bert, so he's going to ask for some of it too. And they have this network of borrowing it from each other and trying to keep track of the money from among each other, that they are never able to save large amounts of money to do anything. And so they stay perpetually in chronic poverty. And the SALT program is designed and structured in a way that they are able to come beyond that they actually can save a bit of money and do something with it. So that's the blessing of the SALT program. Now let's get into some, we're going to take a look at Nigeria. Nigeria is this country right here in the middle of Africa. It reaches down towards the ocean. But it's a hot and dry country. Let's give an overhead shoot here from a drone picture. A lot of dusty roads. Here's another overhead. A lot of old homes, and it is as a country. It's quite in poverty. It's one of the most populous countries in Africa, and there are many needs there. Like I said, it's very overpopulated and many needs there. The men most of the time are working in the fields. It is not unusual for most of the farmers, especially not in the city areas, but more in the rural areas, the men are out working in the fields. The ladies, as we are used to, are homemakers. They raise the family, but many times they have a small business off to the side of their house or maybe in front of the yard. It might be a little sewing business that they do. It might be a little roadside stand where they sell fruits or vegetables, or maybe some household stuff. Things like that. There's very often the ladies are trying to help along with the family's financial situation. And so here's a man that's working in his field. Here's a picture of the market scene. They don't have Walmarts like we do. They don't have nice little corner stores, but they'll have these markets usually weekly. Some in the bigger cities are every day. But here's where all of the trading and all the life's activities get done. We're going to meet Paul today. Paul is a savings group member from Nigeria, but Paul is not like you and I are. He cannot walk upright. He goes around on his hands and legs, and so he has four sandals instead of two. Now, we could think about Paul and say, well, what's the big deal? Here in America, there's a lot of people handicapped, but in Africa and many of those developing countries, if you are handicapped, you're a beggar. You have no opportunity. There's no opportunity for you. I've been in Africa quite a few times, and you go out into the middle of a busy street, and I'm thinking like in downtown Millersburg, right in the middle of town at this red light. The light turns red, and the beggars scoot right out in front of the cars and right into the middle of the street, and they're begging for money. That's how they make their living. Paul has no opportunity in Africa because he's handicapped. He is not going to be educated. Nobody is going to take care of him. And he is pretty much despised and rejected by his fellow man. That's who Paul would be. But Paul is not that kind of person. Paul actually comes around quite well. He has this bicycle, and he cranks around town, going to wherever he wants to. Paul says this. He said, I might not have legs like other people, but he said, I have hands. And furthermore, he says, if a man has hands, he can work. So I'm really blessed by Paul's spirit. But like I said, he's a savings group member. And he said, I'm not like others who just sit around and wait for aid. Again, I'm referring to being handicapped and being a beggar. He said, I'm not that kind of person. I'm not just going to wait and sit around. But he wasn't always that way. He was He has learned a trade of a shoe cobbler. That's what he does for a living here. You can see he is cutting out shoes. He makes new shoes as well as repairing some old shoes. But he said, when I was 22, I was dumped off in the village like I was never going to be useful. No one cared for me. He said, no one taught me any skill. But he said, I learned the shoemaking trade, and I'm not sure quite all the chain of events, whether he became part of the savings group first and then learned shoemaking. I'm not quite sure of that, but nonetheless, he learned shoemaking trade. He's here in his store. This is where he sells shoes, and being part of a savings group is very helpful for someone like Paul, because even if he had his shoe store, I think he might have been a cobbler first, but the capital was very limited, so he might have had 1 or 2 pairs of shoes in his store. But now, being part of the savings group, he's able to borrow money from the group, buy more leather and more stock, and maybe have 10 pairs of shoes there. Now his business improves, and he is able to pay back faster and his loan back, and he can better take care of himself. So those are the small ways that savings groups are very, very important in these developing countries. We could ask the question, well, why don't they go just to the bank and get a loan? Banks in other countries are not like banks around here. They are there to take advantage of people. Their interest is, usually 20, 25%, sometimes on up. I was actually in a situation where we were in Bangladesh, and there was a bank personnel there at the house collecting money from a small loan that this family had made to buy a motorcycle or something to get around, or was a taxi. And we figured out they were charging 110% interest. You can't do life like that. I mean, all of us know math that you can't make a living like that. So many of these small businesses, what we call small business, I'm talking about table-sized little business where you have they're selling maybe fruits and vegetables. They can't get a loan from a bank. It's just impossible. Now they might be able to borrow from relatives if money is there, but not quite so handy like we can have it here. Anyway, let's go on with Paul. Now, as he's gone through life, he takes young boys to himself, and he trains them. He teaches them how to be shoemakers. He is so thrilled about having a job and taking care of his own things that now he wants to give back to the others in the community. Paul says that God enabled me to get married, and they have a family here. Here's his wife, and she is handicapped as well, but they have 3 young boys. Because his wife, of her health, Paul has a lot of medical bills, but he says this, I pay all my bills from my business. He takes care of all his wife's medical needs and so forth, and he says, with my business, I feed my family. And also with my business, we pay for our children's education. And so it is just a blessing for Paul to be part of a savings group, part of the structure, learning how to better run a business. It's a picture of a savings group. I don't think this is Paul's savings group, but some similar like this. He said, this group is helping me a lot. He got low interest loans for his business there. Right here you see the facilitator. This man will go from group to group, like I had mentioned earlier, teaching them. And this is it would be in northern Nigeria, where this group is located, where Paul's located. Here we see a picture of the handbook or the manual that he's teaching out of. Each member will get one of those, even though they might not be able to read. Some of those, quite a few of them are not able to read, but they might have school children in their home that can read the lessons to them. Paul says they are teaching us God's word, and out of this also I'm able to save money. This is just a picture of the group. These facilitators put in a lot of long hours. Here you see 2 of them heading down the road to their next savings group. It's quite dangerous anyway to get from group to group, so let's remember to pray for these SALT facilitators to get to their group meetings. Here's a picture, kind of a dark picture of a close-up of the lockbox and their passbook here. They're counting up their money and doing their financial transactions. Facilitators help oversee that, to make sure everything is done correctly. Then he takes all the financial record keeping and brings them back to the office, and every month those get sent to the United States here to the CAM office, and we get to also just another layer of accountability. It's not that we necessarily need to see what they're doing, but it's just helps bring another layer of accountability, because when we got a program of this size, 80,000 members, we want to be careful we don't just throw money anywhere and everywhere. So yeah, that's what this does. Here is Dawi Thomas. Dawi Thomas is a native Nigerian Christian man, and he oversees all of the operations in Nigeria. And he also reports to American staff person here in the United States. But Dawi is taking care of that. He is here in his office, reports all the activities back to the CAM office. And there are nearly 8,000, maybe at this point over 8,000 members in Nigeria that he and his team are responsible for. All right, let's go to another part of the globe. This is in Bangladesh, and this is a story of Reba. Reba is a young married lady. Reba and her family are quite poor. They come from a tribal community, and tribal people in Bangladesh are some of the poorest people in Bangladesh. Majority of the Bangladeshis are Muslims. There are also quite a few Hindus. But since Reba's family is neither, they are neither Hindu nor Muslim, many times they get taken advantage of. They're just tribal people. So Reba would not have expected to get anywhere in life. Her family would have been basically slaves. And 3 years ago, Reba joined a salt savings group in her village. Again, not sure if this is the group, but it would be something very similar. This is a typical group in Bangladesh. Here you see the complete shift in how their cultures behave and act. You saw the other group is hot and dusty, and they were kind of out in the open. Here's more of a tropical setting where they're sitting on a prayer mat, and I'm guessing most or many of those would be Muslim people. But anyway, as a savings group member, she attends very faithfully every week. And over time, she started thinking, what can I do to bring my family, what can I do to help bring my family out of poverty? What can I do? And so they talked about it, she and her husband, and so they decided they're going to buy a cow. They didn't have enough money to pay for the cow, but she had some savings. She had been saving up money. And then also with the loan from her group, and the money she had saved up, she was able to buy this cow. That is a substantial accomplishment for a tribal family like that. We could think, well, big deal, what's a cow? But that is actually a huge accomplishment. It helps them, not only lifts them out of poverty, but it also, I don't know how to say this rightly, but it also elevates their status in society. And no longer is she looked upon, because she's a livestock owner, they're not quite looked upon like a slave anymore. But some months later, the cow gave birth to a calf, and I think this would have been a little later anyway, maybe a year or so later. But at the moment, these two cows, at the market price is about anywhere from $1,000 to $1,100. And again, to us Americans, that might not seem like such a big thing, but that is really, really big. That's a lot of money. Bangladesh is a very poor country. So Reba is here pictured with her husband on the inset there, and one son. Actually, no, here's her husband and son, and she and her youngest son are there in the house that they rent. Yes.
Do you know what the initial investment was? Was it around 300?
I think so, yeah, because she bought quite a young cow. It was actually just we would consider it a calf, and so I think the initial investment was about $300 US, which is also quite a chunk of money to come up with. But considering she probably had nothing when she started in the savings group, but after being in there for a number of years. But anyway, this is quite a fulfillment for this tribal family. She says the SALT program is teaching us. And this is, you got to try to understand their way of talking. The SALT program is teaching us how to come back from bad life to better life. And so it's quite a fulfillment again for this family. Reba has more dreams. She expects the herd to grow, and hopefully she desires that hopefully in the future she wants to buy land and maybe have their own home. So that's a big achievement, real blessing for that family. Okay, let's go to Ukraine. I thought it'd be interesting just to share a little bit about Ukraine, because they are at war right now with Russia. Ukraine, this is kind of looking down from the top of the globe, but right here's Russia. You got Europe strung over this way, Africa's down here. This man, Jan, is a salt savings group member. We have savings groups in Ukraine. He has a wood carving business, but at the beginning of the war, he left and went to Italy with his family. Here's a picture of some of the things that he carves. In September, he returned back home and continued with his business, and he is doing quite well. It's another picture of what he's carving. I just wanted to throw this real quick story in here, considering that they are at war and there's a lot of trauma going on, yet the savings groups are continuing. They are actually amazingly doing well. They're saving money, and they are continuing on. Here's a couple more pictures of various savings groups. Again, I really am intrigued with the cultural differences throughout the globe. You know, we looked at Africa. They were out in the open, hot, dry, dusty. Then Bangladesh, more tropical, on a prayer mat. Now here, they mostly meet inside their churches. There's a savings group in the church. This is more of a family-type savings group. They also do that as well, where they have family groups. Here's a youth savings group. These are all in Ukraine. Another one here from, that's also Ukraine. This is, I believe, also a youth group in a church. And one final picture here of savings group. I was intrigued with this picture in India with the cow looking on, and she was interested what's going on. Let's shift gears a little bit and look at microloans. We first started with microloans with the concept that we, as American donors, would give small amounts of money, have small amounts of loans. Actually, the American donors donated to the SALT program. SALT program dispersed small business loans to people that maybe had business, maybe people that were already knew a little bit about business, but they needed capital injected into their communities. We don't do so much of that anymore. It works kind of like this. These microloan members, they receive their initial teaching and they have to also save some money. After about 6 weeks, they'll receive a business loan. And I'm talking about just small loans, $100, maybe $200 at the most. They improve their business profit. They improve their business, and with the profit, you know, they start paying back loans, and then they're eligible to receive another loan. And so we have only about 2,000 members. It worked well, but it seems the savings groups are working much better because it's all their money. Everything is indigenous within their communities. Here in this setting, they are still somewhat dependent on loans. I'm not sure how to feel about it. I'm depending on a loan too. This lady here, her name is Fatima. She was able to get a loan to buy that freezer right there. She is from Nicaragua? Yes, Nicaragua. And she keeps various products in her house, ice cream, soft drinks, has a little store. She stores stuff in her freezer for people and also makes ice. So she has this as her small business, and this is just an example of what a small business loan, she probably would have never been able to buy this freezer if there wouldn't have been some sort of structure for her to do so. Biblical teaching have been a real blessing for this lady, and she said she has learned a lot about God, and she's blessed through His Word, and she wants to seek after God even more and wants to encourage lost souls to God and wants to be an instrument in His hand. I thought that was a real nice blessing. Let's look at AgriPlus now. AgriPlus works in a similar fashion that microloans or savings groups, except we work strictly with farmers, giving them agriculture teaching. Bring them together in meetings, but instead of giving them financial teaching and so forth, we teach them how to improve their farming practices. Here's a man, his name is Benoit. He is in Haiti. He has 4 children, he's married, and he's been a part of the AgriPlus program since 2019. The soil in his fields were completely depleted. They were just completely, I would say, in my opinion, unfarmable because of erosion. But he began applying some of the teaching and how to deal with his erosion. Right behind him, that's not the picture I wanted, right behind him you see this tall grass. It's called vetiver grass. In Haiti, we teach them how to plant that in even contours across the hillside to stop the rainwater from coming down the hillside and to slow down the erosion. So that is Benoit there, and he lives in a place like this. This is Haiti mountainside. Sometimes we would wonder how can they ever farm, but on these steep mountainsides right here, they're planting crops. In fact, right there and right there are rows of vetiver grass. And they plant crops on there. I've been on hillsides that were steeper than 45-degree angle, that it was, you had to hang on or you just fell out of the fields. And that is not unusual. Farmers do fall out of their fields and get banged up sometimes. But that's how it looks in Haiti. Benoit lives in one of those mountainsides, and you can imagine why his fields were getting depleted. He was asked why he always carries a Bible to the meetings. Now, that is not very unusual. That's not very usual for a Haitian to do that, or somebody in Haiti. And it's just like we generally don't go to our feed meetings or fertilizer meetings and so forth with a Bible in the hand. But he does. And he was asked, why are you always carrying your Bible? And his reply was, the Bible in my hand has some verses that are very important, that I love, and they prepare my soul. They help me with everything that I'm being taught. And so I thought that was a real blessing. Benoit, he also testifies that now, since he has his fields managed well, he says they're producing well. And he was asked, well, what do you say to your neighbors? He said, plant vetiver, plant vetiver, plant vetiver. So that was his testimony. Here is a picture in Ghana. This is a AgriPlus group that is being taught beekeeping. They actually made those hives there out of concrete. They taught them how to make the hives, how to set the hives out, and how to dress the hives with lemongrass and honey to attract bees and maybe a swarming bees in there, and they're teaching them beekeeping. That's the concept. We bring them together maybe every month, not every week, because farmers don't quite have time to get out into meetings every week, but maybe every month we're teaching them how to do soil management, beekeeping, it might be insect integrated pest management, erosion control, anything that we can. As we are teaching them these practical farming skills, we are also teaching them spiritual concepts and Bible teaching. Here's a group in Ghana. Actually, I was in that group. It was maybe a year ago, but this was a group of village leaders that were introducing them to the idea of AgriPlus there in in Ghana. Here is in Bangladesh. They're planting rice. It was a different system of planting rice that they were not used to, and we're just giving them instruction on how to do that. All right, let's go to vocational training. Vocational training is somewhat different from all the others, but it's more of a daily teaching. Here's a picture of Bangladesh. This is a group of ladies that are actually part of a savings group, but they're saying, we're saving this money, what can we do? How can we help provide for our families? We don't have any skills that we know. We don't know, they just don't know anything. So we're teaching them various things. It'll be here they're teaching them dressmaking, pattern making, sewing. So the concept here is slightly different from AgriPlus, from Savings Group, from microloans. The teaching might be, I think this might be a weekly group here, but some of the ones where we have actually orphans that we're training, it's every day. Every day we give them Bible teaching, then we teach them practical skills, how to make furniture. This is Nigeria. We have some that are doing furniture making. They're doing sewing, pattern making. They making bags and purses and various things like that. Here's a group that's learning computer skills. They learn them, teach them how to maybe run a computer, maybe how to do typing, sometimes computer repair, cell phone repair. The concept is just to give them an opportunity for a skill. See, we need to understand, in those countries, if you don't have a skill, you are going to be in poverty. That's just the bottom line. If you don't have something that you have a skill to do, because otherwise you're going to be a day laborer. You're going to be, maybe just somewhat like slave labor. You don't have much chance in life. And so that's why skills and jobs training are very important. But as we do those jobs training, as we do that skills training, we're every day giving them Bible training. Some of these are Muslims. In fact, there's probably quite a few of them in this room that are Muslims. And you come every day learning how to run a computer or how to fix a cell phone. And every day you're going to get Bible training. Every day you're going to get out of the Word of God. And so it's really a blessing to see what's happening in Bangladesh. For example, out of the SALT program, there are There are many spiritual conversations happening. There are many conversions that are happening. And there's even house churches springing up in areas where the SALT program is operating. So that's happening in some of these closed and restricted countries. Here's a picture of a welding school. This is more of maybe a little more high-tech school where they teach them welding, structural welding, and give them jobs. We're not doing so much of that anymore, but it is still being done a little bit because it takes a little more capital to get that going. Just briefly, I'd like to touch on Salt and Light. Salt and Light is a program that we have here in the United States. And the purpose of Salt and Light is to provide a way for Anabaptists in North America to build relationships with their neighbors. And it's to learn through Bible-based financial teaching. It's to extend hope and direction to those experiencing financial difficulties, to pattern what it looks like to walk with Jesus and obey His teaching, and to bring long-term change by helping people better manage their God-given resources. It is for churches like your church here, where it's a 12-week program where you're able to reach out to your community and maybe bring them here and walk them through this financial teaching and help them just, it's nothing that we're not saving money with them, we're not handling any money, and we're not reporting back to the SALT program in any way. It's just more, here's a tool in your hand. It's the same concept that we use abroad, but it's developed for here in the United States. Here's a picture of a group in Tennessee. I think these are in Tennessee. So these are low-income people, some of them, and we asked the question, how can we help them? Here's another picture. This, I think, is in Pennsylvania. And see, they're interacting. They're doing some role-playing and just trying to get a better concept on how to manage their finances. Here's another group, I think, in Tennessee. So that is the overview of all the SALT program. I had to go through that fairly rapidly, or else we'd be here for a long time. I could sit down and tell story upon story, but I don't want to bore you in that. The question that we want to end with, as we come to the end here, does the SALT program actually work? And I didn't know where to go for this, but I could have told you, like I said, in Bangladesh, where there's a lot of spiritual success and conversions are happening and churches are starting. I could have taken you to Haiti and looked at the various groups that are actually saving substantial amounts of money. There's one group that had just come to the end of their year. This is their third year now that they're meeting. This is a large group. There's 80 people in that group. And they shared out dispersed among themselves all their savings, and they had $120,000 US in Haiti. That is a lot of money. So I could tell you that it's working financially. But I thought what I'd like to do is maybe look at a case study of the SALT program in northern Nigeria. And what I'd like to focus on, not Nigeria, Ghana. Ghana is right in here, tucked in here next to or in between Nigeria and Liberia, some other countries there. What I'd like to focus on in asking the question, does it actually work, is it sustainable, or is this something that we Americans are just continually pumping money into and pumping money into and pumping money into? And in my mind, that is not sustainable. When I look at the word sustainable, to me it means something that will function well after the American went back home again. That is a true picture of sustainability. That's why handouts and aid is really not sustainable, because after the American leaves, the people are still in poverty. That's why it's not working well. But we want to look here at this country, North Ghana, or the northern region of Ghana. It'd be right up on top here. Across the center here is the Sahara Desert, and northern Ghana, it's just reaching into the Sahel region or the Sahara region. This is in the dry season, and it becomes very dry. They have 6-month rainy season, 6-month dry season. And in the dry season, everything dries down except the trees. And it becomes dusty, and by the end of the dry season, before the next crop has been, or after the next crop is planted, before they can harvest, is what they call the hunger season. I asked a man one time, what did you eat in the hunger season? He said, we had chilies and water. chili peppers and mixed it with water. And we had a soup. He said that's what we ate. There's nothing else left. All the grain was gone. Either the rats had eaten it or the weevils, because they have no good storage. And everything else was priced beyond their price tag. They couldn't afford to buy anything else. And they would go into debt to try to feed their families, but now they're into debt before the planting season has ever started. They were in a perpetual debt cycle. They just never got out of it. And so let's look at this country and do a little case study here. Charity Ministries decided they're going to start evangelizing in North Ghana in 1998. But they had an intention, we're going to go there and preach the gospel. We're not going to hand out aid. We're just going to do that. And Daniel Keniston, who lives down there yet, he's been down there almost 25 years, or maybe 25 years already. He told me our churches were not thriving. Yes, people were getting converted. But he said the problem is mom and dad and the children would come to church and they were hungry. And he said if children are hungry, the mom and dad are hungry, they just don't thrive spiritually. He said we were having a problem. We didn't know what to do. We could hand out aid, but then we become a church that is feeding rice Christians, Christians that come to church for rice. And he said that is not working either. What do we do? So finally they decided in 2016, or it's 2015, they decided they're going to start the SALT program. The first groups were started in 2016. And it was slow going because those people are very poor, or were very poor. In 2017, they started AgriPlus and the agricultural dimension of that. The years have gone by, and the groups there are actually saving money. One of the village leaders told me, he said, now we can take care of our own people. We have been saving money, but up to now they had been, if they needed to buy a church building or build a church building, they had to ask the Americans, can you give us a little money that we can build a church? Or they would have to ask the Americans, our widows are struggling, can you help us a little bit? He said, we take care of our own people. We now can take care of our own people because we are saving money and we are learning how to function together. I'll touch a little bit more on the AgriPlus there. That has been a real blessing for them as well. The American family that was overseeing the salt operations there in North Ghana went home last year. Now, he still goes down there maybe three or four times a year, but eventually that will also come to an end. Their native indigenous staff are fully operating the program. They are doing the reporting. Reports come back to us, and they are fully managing the program. And their plans are in the next few years that the Ghanaians there plan to operate the SALT program with no American funding. They are working towards that, and they have not arrived yet. Their facilitator that goes out and teaches, he would be taken care of by their churches, and they would fully manage. So this is a case study of the program there in North Ghana, and it does work. We're about ready to let them go. Yes, we're going to help them. We're going to make sure things are functioning well, but we're not necessarily having long-term financial input, and they intend to grow. I talked to the American staff person that used to live there, and he said, yeah, they are planning to have two savings groups in every village where they have churches, and also one AgriPlus group in every village. And he said eventually their long-term vision is to do outreach and to go into another community and start this up and keep this thing growing. So that's how it works there, and I would say that is the definition of success, both financially and spiritually there. Here's a picture of their AgriPlus activities. Right here is what we call a grain silo. It holds about 40 bushels. We helped them design that thing, or actually we designed, some of our staff there designed that. Originally was considered for a water tank, but it's airtight, watertight. In the end of the harvest, they'll fill those grains. That's what they call these head pans. They'll measure these head pans of grain into it. Maybe 10 families would have 2 of those silos. And they would bring the grain in. Instead of saving cash in savings group, now they're saving grain in their silos. Before they had these metal silos, they would have maybe burlap bags, or maybe they had some mud structures or woven straw structures. But you know, the mice got in there, the weevils got in there. They ate about 50% of their crop before the hunger season came on. And one man said, yeah, we feed the rats and starve the children. And so this has been a real blessing for them, because these families save this money, and then they seal the thing up and wait about 3-4 months when the people start running out of grain, and the grain is way high, and they had started getting hungry, and they would share out that grain. They measured it back out again. And so that's always been a real blessing for them. One man said to me when I was down there in 2017, he said, no, it was, I think it was in 2017, he said, this is the first time ever that I had grain left over at the end of the hunger season. And so they're starting to catch the vision of that. Some of them are of these groups, they're starting to put 3 or even more silos in, and they'll fill them with things like beans, and then when the price goes up, they'll sell them out, and they'll start making a profit for the group. So yes, it does work. The SALT program is working, and it's working well there in North Ghana. Some other countries work differently. I don't see Haiti ever graduating where they're fully functioning on their own. They've been so dependent on American input for all these years that it's going to be a little hard for them to just say, okay, now we're on our own. But maybe in 40 years from now, we'll see what... So anyway, why does the SALT program exist? It helps people discover sustainable ways to provide for their families. And it models and teaches a biblical way of life. So thank you for coming. God bless you. I'm going to open it up for questions. If anybody has questions, we can turn the lights on. That would be fine. Any questions? Either I did a very poor job or did a well job. There are brochures out in the foyer. Feel free to take some along if you want to on the SALT program. And also, there's a newsletter sign up. If you wish to get the SALT newsletter, we have a quarterly newsletter we send out every quarter. Feature a different country every time. We feature a different facilitator every time. And then we give a little story testimony of a person, how they took out a loan and had their life story there. All right. I think I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Edward. No questions? Or were you all scared?
Yeah, you ever think about doing that in the Latin America so people want to work?
Yeah, there's plenty of people here in America that need SALT program.
Yeah. What's the general process for starting it in another country where you haven't had the SALT program before?
Where we never had the SALT program before? Yeah, generally what we'll do is like, for example, Liberia, we send a team over there, an exploratory team, and it can vary several different ways. Maybe, should I be wearing my mic here, or does it pick it up?
No, just speak.
Okay, yeah, and it can vary in several different ways. Sometimes there is a mission or a church that is already there operating in country, and they're looking for something. That would be the case of North Ghana. They were looking for something. What can we do to better enhance or work with the process that we already have here? You know, the evangelizing process. So that's one way it can happen. That we'll just give them the tools, we'll give them the training, and you'll go out into a village, introduce it. That's also a very interesting process, because many times in a village, you go out there and they say, no, we can't save money, we're poor. And so we say, okay, show us, they have a whiteboard. Let's write on here everything that you spend money on that month. Well, yeah, rice and chicken comes on there, maybe clothes or school fees or, you know, of course, the bottom of the list, the more lesser items that they don't want to talk about, like cigarettes come on there and alcohol maybe and jewelry. And they say, okay, now let's cross out everything that you need to exist. So they cross out chicken, they cross out, you know, the food items and the must-haves. And they have a price behind everything. So now they have all the vices are left and the candy bars and sodas, they start adding those up and you say, well, this is actually what you can save for them. So they form a group. And they get a group, they come back and say, okay, now in several weeks we're coming back, we're going to start a group. And they want the most trusted members in their village. They don't want somebody that did, because that is their collateral. They don't have collateral to pay back their loans. But their collateral is their trust in each other. That's the only way the SALT program works. And that's why it wouldn't work in America. We don't trust each other.
But Edward, that's not quite fair, because there are countries where they don't trust each other.
That's right.
And it's small baby steps towards building trust.
That's right. That's right. Some of the South American countries, that trust factor is not quite there. Africa, it is in some of the Asian countries. But so it varies a lot in countries. How it functions, but yeah, then they'll sit down with them in probably several weeks, and they write up their bylaws. What is their fee that they have to pay if they're late, and what is the fee they charge them a fee if their cell phone rings, or we should start that too. And they have these various processes, and how long is the term going to be? Are we going to meet for a year or 6 months? Some kind of cycle with the farming cycle. Others go for longer. How long do we meet? And then they put all their bylaws. We have kind of a structure of bylaws we recommend, but we want them to own it. So if they decide how much interest they're charged, some will charge 20% interest to each other. But that's all going back to the figure there. But others, like in Nigeria that I was showing, they have low interest. They want to try to help their members. So yeah, they get their bylaws, and then they meet the first week, and off they go.
So he described one way of starting a savings group that would be with a mission presence in country. If there's no mission presence in country, like we're trying to get something started, there are people there that have interest already. Now we're trying to find a church that is willing to facilitate or to administrate the program.
Yes.
Lord willing, I'll be out there in Pennsylvania next week to present it. Yeah.
That would be a case like there was no Anabaptist churches there, nobody really there. There was somebody that was interested, and there was connection. I'm not quite even sure what the connection was with. So there was some connection there, and there was enough of similarity to our values that we felt it's able to work. We're not necessarily, we're careful in starting a SALT program somewhere where there's no similarities. You know, we're talking about non-resistance, we're talking about divorce-free marriage and all those things. We want at least several points of similarity where we feel that we can function. Because we're not interested in the SALT manuals going out with our name and everything on, and we're not at all at the same place. So there's enough of similarities, so yeah, it works best if a church comes alongside, or a group of churches comes alongside and owns it. It becomes like a mission board and guidance, and helps pour into this endeavor. It works best that way.
So Cameroon, I'm not sure what all that would entail. If we would have interest, we would start investigating what all it would take. Because there is a presence there now. Is he a doctor, or he's a pastor. Claudia is a pastor, yeah. So that would be our connection to start something. Mm-hmm. In some restricted countries, we don't use the SALT name and we don't use the Christian Aid name because it's restricted.
If in those countries they knew what we were actually teaching, they would give us the next plane ticket the next day. But they don't know, because the manuals are different. The manuals are scrubbed. There's no reference of Jesus Christ, and there's no Bible verses from the New Testament. However, our facilitator that we hire is a Christian man, and he knows the full gospel story, and he'll sit down in the group and give it them all. But without a manual, he does not carry a manual. It's not safe for him to carry a manual. So he gives them the full gospel story, and after a bit, some started wanting to know more, and privately, maybe in homes or elsewhere, they started asking questions, and they began converting. After maybe a year or two, the village leaders started getting a little bit uncomfortable. They realized something is going on here that is, in their minds, a little sinister. But by then, there's so much good things happening financially that they're not able to let this thing go, because their villages are thriving. Their members are village members are starting to have businesses, and they're getting somewhere, and so they just let it go. That has happened frequently.
He talked about in North Ghana where we can't take care of our widows, we can't take care of, what was the other thing you mentioned?
Oh, church buildings.
Yeah, church buildings. So even when they get some pressure from the authorities, when the groups have done some community work, that absolutely almost always takes away the pressure. The authorities, oh, they're doing good. They're doing good to the community.
Mm-hmm.
Where was I going with that?
Yeah, that happens frequently.
Yeah, we encourage social fund. So I didn't know that, but in Dominican Republic, I just found out this I found out yesterday. Dominican Republic, they actually require every member to bring an offering. We call it a social fund. I thought it was just voluntary. I think some countries, some programs just do voluntary. But in Dominican Republic, you're required to bring this little amount of offering every week, and it gets put into a fund. The end of the term, they decide what to do with that social fund. And in Nigeria, I know they sometimes buy gifts and take them to the hospital. In Namibia, they repaired a community well. They benefited from it, but everyone benefited from it. So that's part of the teaching, building community as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that social fund was an aspect I didn't talk about. So besides saving their money every week, and like he said, some countries it's mandatory. Most of them they can just bring what they want to, and so yeah, then they decide what they want to do with that money. In Haiti, there were several groups that went together, and they did a bigger project. I think actually they drilled a well. That's several larger groups than they had. So that raises the favor in the eyes of the village leaders. That the things that they might not be comfortable with, they'll just let it go.
And we're telling you the good stories, but there are times when it's their money. They collected and they saved it, and
they blow it.
and they throw a party and celebrate their achievement, and it's okay. We celebrate as well. Yeah. It's their money.
Yeah. But there have been areas also, and I should throw this out, where there have been failures, where it's just, where we have a country or two where there no longer has.
Yeah, they quit the salt program.
Uganda, they quit the salt. Uganda.
Uganda, you're right. Uganda, we also quit the savings. They're still.
But maybe some of that is because there was not enough vision and not enough energy from the state side. It takes a little bit of energy, and they need to feel our support. Maybe not financially, but they know that is a huge, huge thing in many of these developing countries. Is they really, really, really desire the support of the Americans. And even in Nigeria, where that program is going well, they are very much concerned that if they run into a problem or if there's issues that need to be resolved, that they can take care of, that we can be there to guide them and lead them through. So that's why it's very important for American presence behind the scenes and just encouraging them. I'm going to Nigeria, to Niger, the first country north of Nigeria, in April. And I'll be teaching the facilitators, just encouraging them, teaching them how to teach, and teaching them Christian character. And I don't know, I haven't put my thing together or even thought too much about it yet. But So we go over there, we teach their facilitators, give them training. I was in Haiti last May, and they begged, can't you come at least every 6 months? He said, we have nothing like this. We don't have, and it's true, they don't have good books to study in, and they don't have good teachers and good mentors. We need you every 6 months, at least.
But Edward, understand, they're pouring out every day.
I know.
Every day that they're going out there,
They
they're
are.
preaching 2-3 messages a day.
They are.
Yeah. Does that answer your question as far as how, as far as for Cameroon, I don't know. I would love to get together here soon and talk about it if we would have interest in digging in more, what it would take, what it would require of us, and do we have the energy, do we have the interest? I invite all of you to pray for that opportunity. Are there any more questions? I don't want to prolong this, but okay, thank you again for being here. Let's pray about the opportunity. Maybe God will open doors, or maybe it's not a convenient season for us, but we want what God wants. So, invite you all to stand, and Keith, do you want to dismiss us with prayer, please?
Father in heaven, we thank you for the opportunity to be educated tonight, be taught, to see the opportunities and the needs, how you're working, how you're using funds, how your church is working, building the kingdom. Lord, I just pray that you would bless those who are working in dangerous areas and restricted countries, that your word would go forth in a powerful way through this ministry. That you give us wisdom to know how to go forward and to open doors in the future here at Sunlight. That we have a vision, that we have a zeal to help others, to serve, to spread the gospel. Bless everyone for coming tonight. Pray that you would meet the needs of Christian Aid Ministry as they continue to serve. Be with us as we go our separate ways. Make us a blessing this week. In Jesus' name I pray.
Amen. You're dismissed.